There we go. Welcome to August and the work session of the Aspen City Council of August 3rd. We have two items on our main items on our agenda: the role of council during quasi-judicial matters, and then an update with the Aspen Area Community Trust, and a little discussion about MountainTown's 2030 afterwards. We're going to switch the agenda a little bit so that we can hear from the Aspen Area Community Trust citizens first, since more of them are here. So we'll go forward with that, and thank you so much. I don't know who's going to be presenting.
I'll get started and then turn things over to these.
Okay, thank you, Ben.
Extra chair. Good evening, Mayor and Council. For the record, Ben Anderson, Community Development Director. I'm going to do just a brief introduction and then hand things over to fellow members of my board to go through the slides with you this evening. The last time we were here talking with you, we had a little bit of uncertainty about where we're going, and we were asking for some additional dollars out of community development budget to support some additional legal work on submitting our 501c3 application as a board. We put an awful lot of time and effort and energy into that 501c3 application. We were expecting the turnaround for that to be something like 6 or 9 months down the road. And I don't know what's going on in the IRS, but there was like a 2-week turnaround. And so one of the reasons we're back to you, because we said we would be, is that we've successfully received our 501c3 application. I'm probably stealing a little bit of Ann's excitement as I get into that, but I think it explains our timing here. I will also just say that, I want to make very clear that obviously the City of Aspen and community development.
So there is a whistling noise coming through.
Hopefully it's not through my teeth.
No.
Yeah. The City of Aspen and Community Development Department have given significant staff resources to helping to stand up this new, very exciting nonprofit in our community. But the City of Aspen, and particularly the Community Development Department, is very much interested in handing this over to this now independent nonprofit. And we want to make that relationship very, very clear as we move forward. I think most of you understand that the City of Aspen's Community Development Department director will remain a member of the board to serve as a liaison between the city and the AACT. But following that, we really do see this as a fully independent nonprofit organization. So with that, I'd like to invite my fellow members of the board up to the table, and we'll move through a short deck of slides with you.
You're going to run the slides?
I'll run the slides.
Okay.
There's more chairs if you want.
Hi, Ann Mullins of Aspen. Good afternoon, Council, Mayor Richards, and staff members who have helped us so much along the way on this. I'm really excited to be able to present this after all the work that we've done, and I have to really thank Ben and Haley for, there she is, for all the work they've done to help us. So, Aspen Area Community Trust, I will go through this PowerPoint, it's about 7 slides, I think, and then please ask questions. And my fellow board members have joined, and might as well just introduce yourselves.
Duncan Close. Tim Sack. Chris Bendon.
And there are a few others. There'll be a list of board members there. First slide, just a quick explanation. We are focusing on the commercial sector. Aspen has been so successful at affordable housing. We don't want to in any way compete. If we need to partner on some projects to reinforce an affordable housing project, that would be great. But the slide on the right side of the slide is just representing that, the commercial sector. The other thing, it's not all bricks and mortar. It's preservation of the older buildings you can see there. It's preservation of community values, the lodgepole pines that are the rugby goalposts. Things like that are really unique to the community and keep our community authentic and keep the character. And the old wild fig, I'm not sure, Tim, you have to tell me if it has a new name.
Eddie's Cafe.
Oh, that's part of Eddie's too. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, by the way, go to Eddie's. It's terrific. So anyway, that's just the idea of this slide, is just to represent what we are focusing on physically and socially. So next slide. Oh, there it is. You can all read this. I'll read out the mission. This is what has guided us for the last 18 months: to preserve essential community-serving spaces through strategic acquisition and leasing, as well as to promote and steward community assets that keep Aspen accessible and authentically local. Oh, Michael. Michael Miracle.
Welcome.
Okay, so background. The conversation about losing affordable, authentic spaces in the commercial sector began almost 20 years ago at City Council table. At that point, we were focusing on affordable housing. There wasn't the interest to chase this idea, and it was somewhat dropped, picked up again, dropped. But displacement of the commercial sector really accelerated during COVID. And then in 2024, City of Aspen applied for and received a DOLA grant to study the feasibility of utilizing a community land trust, which is a unique kind of nonprofit, to stop or mitigate this trend. With additional support from the city, 18 months of really intense community participation, AACT was formed in late 2025 to address the problem. I could do that too, you know. So here's the board of directors. You can, it's a great board, very talented, very knowledgeable, and very tied into the community. Next. And then recent developments. This is what we want to focus on today and take your questions about. The Community Foundation agreed to serve, Aspen Community Foundation agreed to serve as physical agent and technical advisor for AACT for 2 years when we were anticipating our 501c3 application would take easily up to a year. So we were quite honored that they took us on, that they had the faith that we were going to be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish. So they took us on, and actually the story was I signed the contract on Wednesday, and we got our 501c3 status on Friday.
You worked fast.
It worked
You
really
worked pretty fast.
But aside from that, we are certainly staying in the 2-year contract. It is great for them to have our back and help us grow through this and learn from them. So so that was June, and then July 14th, we had a strategy and action retreat and identified strategic framework and priorities right up there: stewardship, expanses of commercial sector, affordable space, marketing, leadership capacity, and community space activation and programs. I got it. Then we also, with the board, as you saw, a board like we have, people have so much experience in town and experience with what is successful, what is not successful. And every meeting we would throw out all these ideas of how we could achieve our goal. So one of the goals of this retreat was to get all these ideas on the table, start prioritizing, start testing the feasibility of these ideas. So these are some that came to the top, not all, it's not inclusive of everything, but these are some of the ideas that we came up with. And then for goals. 1-year goal, and I actually would like it to be a 6-month goal: hire the executive director, raise the funds to support the ED and needed consultants, develop a narrative for the organization and a very strong brand, expand the board. We have a very good, talented board, but there's a lot of work to do, and there are some gaps in our experience, technical expertise, and we could expand the board to really strengthen it. Also, another thing I think is really important, form some ad hoc community committees. As we're going through, it's a community trust. We need to continue to take in community opinion, ideas, form ad hoc committees which will address current problems, whether it's developing guidelines for what spaces we look at to perhaps manage, what are criteria, guidelines for choosing tenants for spaces, and all the other things we don't know we're going to run into. But again, invite the community to help us determine our next steps forward. 5-year goals, 2 to 5 wins. I certainly hope we can have that. They won't look all the same. Some might, but I'm assuming they won't all look the same. Expanded toolkit, obviously. Really important stable leadership, not just executive director, but also the board of directors, and staffing model established, and then the fundraising goals being consistently met every year. And then 10-year, this is more what does success look like. Commercial spaces are activated, leased, preserved. Businesses are supported. We have partnerships with the community and property owners. There's great community awareness, engagement in this nonprofit. Again, stable funding strategy, consistent leadership and staffing. And then really exciting, if we get there, development, I hope we do, development of a model that can be replicated in other communities, probably other mountain towns. And then for financial needs, and we're here tonight to talk to you about that, the short-term needs. We decided, and this came out of the retreat, that the most effective way to roll this organization out, now that we have everything in place, including the 501c3 status, is to do a really robust communication campaign. Develop the brand, develop the message, raise awareness in Aspen and the community so that we're supported by the community, and then hopefully go on to be supported by donors, whether it's small donors or large donors. Just get everybody engaged and excited and interested in participating in this effort. And we estimated about $25,000 to hire a communication specialist and put together that 3 to 4 month campaign. Midterm, again, executive director, hiring costs and compensation, and then consultant costs as we need them, and then long-term, staff salaries, benefits, office space, expense, and all the other things that come with a successful nonprofit. Probably a lot of what we don't know yet. So anyway, that's pretty much it. And if you've got questions, we're all here to answer them. Thank you.
Let me say, are you asking for a little $25,000 boost now to start that campaign, or is it be a? Okay.
Yes.
Just to be clear.
No, we're asking for that, and then hopefully the next time, whenever it is, I hope a while from now, if we come back to the city, asking for any funding, we'll be able to have proven ourselves, have raised a fair amount of funds, and
No, I just.
and that's how this campaign, hopefully,
Yeah.
will be the results of this.
Well, personally, I think a lot of work has been accomplished, and it's a really exciting endeavor. I had a little slip of paper. I should have brought it in. It's in my car. It was from an old retreat I'd been to, or training session of some sort. And it was a long list of why people don't do things. And it was like they're too daunting, too big, too expensive, too dry, too this, too that. And how when people achieve anything in their professional life or personal life, it's because they decide it's not to anything. And this is needed. And it is a big concept. It's a big idea. It's a groundbreaking. But I think it's too important to walk away from. So I'll turn to my council members for comments, and That's what I'm thinking.
And I just want to remind council that we can't make decisions during
Right.
work sessions. So certainly if there's any request to bring back a funding request to you at a regular meeting, we just ask that you give us direction to put that on the agenda and we can prepare those documents
Formally,
for you.
yeah, okay. Thank you for that, Kate. Council members, questions, comments? Sam?
Just want to start by saying thanks for doing this. It's an incredible endeavor, and it's like a missing gap going along with the land trust and the deed restrictions of housing. The commercial sector is obviously something that we hear about all the time, about the unaffordability and the lack of local spaces. So I'm very excited to at least hold on to what we have, if not add back. So I really appreciate the endeavor. I think your guys' board is made up of incredible people, and I'm excited to see it expand. I just wrote a note to say, looking at the board, I don't think you have anyone in the retail business or a restaurateur or even a landlord. So adding those three sectors, I think, would go a long way towards accomplishing what you're looking to accomplish. Because I think what you guys are looking to do, you're going to have to cut against the grain some to get someone to go along with what you're looking to do. And you're looking for a lot of altruism here, so which I think you'll get some. But you definitely want to have each sector of the commercial core on your board to be represented, at least in some capacity. And again, I don't have any questions. I'm just excited for your first win, when you can create an example of when you've taken a building or business to be able to stay, and how that can be replicated to others, because I think that first one will create a potential snowball effect, or at least you'll learn from it to how you'll need to proceed going forward. But other than that, I full speed ahead, and I'm glad you got your nonprofit status so quickly. So I just am very appreciative.
Thanks.
Very good, thank you. Bill?
Thanks. I echo everything Sam said, and I wanted to thank each of you for participating in this. It's such a great board of people that I respect and I know care deeply about our community, and I think that it's a very interesting idea. My only question would be, and I know you know where I stand on this, but if the intent is to be very independent from the city, why come to us for money now?
Shall I take it?
think we're
Everybody?
fledgling. I don't think we're ready to fly on our own, and it would probably be that way for a time period. There's not a model that we're stepping into. We're creating it as we go. And you saw the members of the board. We're all very busy people. We need an executive director. We need to have some support in the community to be able to attract an executive director. We need to have funding. So it's a transition. Honestly, I'd love for this to be a loan and to come back and write you a check for $25,000. That's not in our immediate future. We will be back with a more fulsome request, guaranteed. I think we'd all like to be back in a way where we come in and we say, look, this is what we've gained from small dollar donors, folks in the community that we've talked to that we crowdsource, and they want to give us $10. I think we want to go to landlords and some of the big players in town and say, you know, we have this momentum, would you like to double that? But we'll be back in this room saying we have this momentum, would you like to double that? And I think that's just sort of the reality of getting this thing up and going, and we all hope that it'll be successful.
I'll address the timing a little bit. The good side and the bad, the good and the bad. We got that 501c3 literally in 10 days from when we submitted the application. When we submitted, we thought we had another 6 months to go out and talk to donors and, you know, maybe the bigger donors, not the bigger community, but start developing relationships and that kind of thing. And once we got the 503 in 10 days, we thought we've really got to get going. And that we set up that retreat so that we could put some guidelines in place and some real, the strategic framework. And now we want to keep building on that right away. And 25,000, again, as Chris says, we're hoping this is going to capture the smaller donors, the $10, $100, that kind of thing, and create a really strong platform, and then we can go to some of the bigger donors. But we're coming to you partly because we thought we had another 6 months to a year to kind of tread water and work this out, and all of a sudden we got the green light. We want to keep going with the momentum.
Got it, I understand that, and thanks for those answers. And I want to see your success here. And as I've expressed to you previously, Ann, I am concerned how your most impactful donors and partners will participate or collaborate with you if they think you are beholden to the city. That's my biggest concern here. So I really like Chris's idea of the loan, and that's what I would support structuring this as, so that you can say from the very beginning, we are not beholden to the city. We are an independent entity. We are here for the future of the community of Aspen, not the government of Aspen.
Right.
I think that's very powerful, and I think that gives you the best chance for success, which is what I want to see happen here. So I cannot support a straight contribution because I don't think it's in your best interest or this organization's best interest. But I can support a loan.
Okay.
If I may just add.
Yeah, let's make sure everyone has a microphone kind of
Yeah,
close to
she
them.
asked me to speak into this one.
And Chris, pull yours over closer to you if you talk again.
And please, the rest of you weigh in, Ben in particular, but I think, Bill, to your point, one of the principal arguments for our 501c3 status was leaning in on lessening the burden of government. So we actually have as kind of a defining characteristic that got us our 501c3, essentially making the promise that keeping government sort of out of our efforts is actually in our kind of founding statement.
Exactly my point.
Okay. Other council
Thanks.
member comments?
I have a follow-up to that, but I first want to just say thanks for all being here and thank you for participating. This is really exciting I think this has moved quickly, as you've noted, and I'm sure it's taken a lot of work to get to this point. Bill, I think that's a good point, and I wonder if this could, I don't know if this is what it would fall under anyway, but like a one-time grant request that we sometimes get from nonprofits in the community, so it's not directly tied to us sitting up here or the city in general, but then it sort of gives you the boost that you need and keeps it separate is maybe one thought of how to make that work. And then another question I had is, we have had, there's been some media coverage of the announcement of this. You don't have to get into specifics, and I'm sure I don't want you to reveal too much, but how has sort of the temperature been of downtown commercial landlords, businesses on this whole project? Is there sort of like a feeling or that you can share with us?
Well, I'll speak to that, and then anybody else add. And this kind of answers Sam's comment too. When we started with the DOLA grant, we started with over 70 stakeholders in various focus groups, I guess. And it was a slice of the commercial sector. So it was retail, it was restaurant, it was office, commercial office. And we involved all those people. And from the start of taking those 70 people and then kind of condensing it down to two groups, one that was talking about affordable housing, one about affordable commercial, and then condensing it down to our final 8-person board of directors. We've continued to get support from every sector. There's always the question of how is it going to be fair? How are you going to choose tenants? How are you going to choose spaces? And that's what I was referring to. As we get into additional details and guidelines, we'll go back to the community and said, what seems fair to you, what works? But, and you guys can add, but I don't think we've gotten anything but support since we started.
Good. It seems like it's very much a moving project, like evolving and changing, nebulous. I don't have any other questions, but thank you for all being here.
Yeah, I think I know everybody on the board, some better than others, but I'm really excited, as well as everybody else, of the community buy-in on this. Thanks for all the time you've spent on it. I've been excited about the possibilities associated with the Community Land Trust since I first learned they existed a little over a year ago. And I want to say I'd enthusiastically support your monetary request. I think $25,000 against the community benefits that are possible is a risk I'm willing to take. I think this does have the community's best interests at heart. So I enthusiastically support this.
Thank you. Similar to Christine or John, I think, and I'm not sure, Sam, on Bill's question, I'd rather make a grant of $25,000. I'd like to prepare it for a regular agenda that we would do from our general fund, I'd imagine. But we can discuss that further. I only can think of other nonprofits that get started up, and this one has been started up with support from the Department of Local Affairs, seeing the value in it, that it could go further into other communities, that our departments have been supporting it. The city supported before my time getting on here to move it forward. This seems like a simple request to keep it moving forward. And I don't see quite the same argument that you're making, Bill. I can see trying to raise money and asking someone for $100, what's it going to be used for? Oh, it's to repay the city for the $100, the loan they gave us. That makes me seem like they'd be more beholden to the city than they've received a grant. There's no strings attached. And, you know, when I look at all the grants that we give out each year, there are desires for performance metrics and what are you delivering, what are you giving back to the community, so on and so forth. But it's not that those nonprofits then are turning off donors because, oh, we got a grant from the city, so now, you know, it's not, we're not beholden to the city at any of the Science Center or the Nordic, you know, any of these groups don't feel, and we sometimes have meetings to prove it, feel beholden to the city because they received a grant. So I just don't, that doesn't affect me that way. And I just hate to send this new nonprofit off burdened with debt that they're working to repay as opposed to working on their project. So I think there is a majority that'd like to move forward to bring something to council in the future. Is that, do you can understand where I see
I understand. I want to clarify one thing. I'm not talking about the $100 donor or the $10 donor or the $1,000 donor. I'm talking about the real partners who might contribute their property worth many millions of dollars in some way, shape, or form. And that's who I'm talking about when I'm really talking about the skepticism of being beholden to the city. That's my biggest concern.
Okay.
And that's a perspective that I think I share with some others in this community. And I've received a few calls of skepticism about this, and I said, give them a chance. They have the community's interest at heart. I have no idea how this is going to work. They don't have any idea how this is going to work. It's going to take time to figure out, and it'll evolve over time. But again, it's not about the relatively small donors to a very grand effort here. It's about the people that would be sacrificing tremendous financial resources to contribute to something like this for the well-being of the community and in the best interest of the community. And that's the perspective that I'm concerned about that relationship on.
Thank you.
That makes sense.
I don't know that there's further questions or information you want from us at this time. I think everyone, I agree, it's great work, and I want to see it go forward. Chris?
I was just going to share one bright point. I don't know if we'd fully qualified under the WIN category yet, but a colleague that I work with that is a commercial developer elsewhere, he enjoys Aspen. He likes to not work when he's Aspen, so he just has a house, and he's a pretty quiet person. But he has a you know.
Development interest.
Yeah, he understands development in Florida and stuff in Europe, and we were talking about this, and the conversation evolved, and we have $20,000 coming our way. Should land in our bank in the next week or two. So, you know, those are the kind of conversations that I think we can continue to have with folks that do feel passionate about Aspen, have a history here, have seen some of the changes, and want to help help in some way, even if we don't know exactly what we're doing yet.
Thanks for,
Appreciate that.
yeah, thanks for having that conversation with them, Chris.
Yeah, it's amazing where one conversation can go sometimes. So again, thank you all for your hard work. If you want to sit around and see how a quasi-judicial hearing should be run, feel free to do so. But otherwise, we're going to take a quick little 5-minute break and then reconvene for the next item. How's that?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Welcome back to the work session of the Aspen City Council. It's about 4:30 on August 3rd. So let's get going. We're going to talk about quasi-judicial hearings and how to separate mentally that process from what are often legislative and not quasi-judicial. And we're going to have the presentation by our city attorney, Kate Johnson. And I just wanted to, for a half second, put on my SERSHA hat. This is the Colorado Insurance Risk Sharing Association, of which we are a member. And so in order to really make sure we don't take unnecessary risk and end up with lawsuits, I saw a really nice presentation they gave at the Colorado Municipal League Conference and thought that maybe we all could use a little bit of a refresher course ourselves up here on the procedure. So that's why we're having this, and thank you very much, Kate, for preparing and bringing it forward.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I know both Councilmember Benedetti and Councilmember Rose has been on P&Z, and we often do these types of trainings for our boards. We try to do them on a yearly basis, so this might ring some bells for you from past experiences, but we don't do it with council quite a bit. The mayor, after the CML conference, asked me to review this with you. So I'm happy to do so. Stop me if you have questions. So we're going to be talking primarily about quasi-judicial decisions affecting, most of the time you see those in land use, but they also can occur in liquor licensing. You've delegated your liquor licensing authorities to a board, so you don't see those types of decisions. But usually quasi-judicial decisions affect an individual. There are sometimes high stakes. You've heard some really big land use cases come before you, and we do our best to not have any missteps because those can create sources for claims, disputes, and sometimes, in very, very rare cases, liability. I just wanted to highlight some of the rules and engagement and some tips for how to maybe approach these types of hearings to keep us out of missteps that could lead to those to negative outcomes if these decisions are challenged. So realistically, there are three roles you play, but I think you mostly deal in two areas. You deal in the legislative role and the quasi-judicial role. So that's what you most often do. Some boards serve also as administrators, but you've delegated most of those administrative powers to Pete, so we're not going to discuss that role or that hat here. When I think people run for office, I think the quasi-judicial role, other than those that have maybe served on the land use board, is kind of the one that's the lesser known aspects of the job and can be, I think, one of the most difficult aspects of your job in some respects. So the rules that apply to quasi-judicial decision-making are distinct from those that apply in most other settings. And they're often counterintuitive when you think of an elected official's role. And we'll talk more about why I say that here. So when these issues come before you, it's always good to have an understanding. Are you asked to act in your legislative capacity, or are you acting in your quasi-judicial capacity? The legislative role is kind of the one I think that most people think of when they think of a role of an elected official. When you're acting as a legislator, you get to listen to citizens who contact you in person, by email, text, or on social media. You can investigate the issues yourself, apply your own personal knowledge about issues. You get to communicate early and often with all of your constituents about these issues. You get to lobby with you get to either advocate for a position in a public setting, or you can even talk to your fellow council members individually, so long as you don't violate open meetings law, and lobby for a position. You can have strong convictions and opinions about these issues, and it's fine to voice those. And then really in these roles, you get to vote on an ordinance or policy-making enactment that will have general and prospective applications. These really involve like the big picture. So the things in red here are okay when you're in your legislative role. I say this because all of these things are not okay in your quasi-judicial role. And that's why I say it's somewhat counterintuitive when you think of what an elected official is asked to do. The quasi-judicial role usually, as I said, involves property rights. You're generally applying general rules to an individual. We see it most common in property owners or applicants who come to you for a land use approval to do something specific. It generally involves making decisions based on pre-existing criteria, the law, and then the evidence that you learned during the public hearing, so the facts. So in the legal world, we often say judges are asked to marry the law with the facts. Here's the law, here's the facts, and you marry those together, and you make findings as to what facts you feel support the decision based on the law that you have before you. It requires due process, it requires notice, a hearing, and a decision based on the record from that hearing. It requires the decision makers to be fair and impartial. That's why we have our conflict of interest rules. They don't apply always in legislative, especially if it's a general applicability policy. But here, you do have to be fair and impartial. You're basically asked to act like a judge. So that's why you hear a lot from lawyers in the land use process, is because it's very akin to the judicial process. And I just wanted to tell you all, I handed you each, and the mayor, I only made 4 copies. I'll give you this copy afterwards, but you've
I was
seen
just
this.
looking around.
I could
don't
see that.
have a copy.
You don't have a copy of this. This was handed out during the mayor's attendance
Facetious.
at her CIRSA presentation on this topic. And so I thought it would just might be
I brought it home
an
for all
easy, it's a nice, easy reference guide, and I'll certainly give you this copy when we're done,
Okay.
but I wanted to keep it in case there were
That's no
questions
problem.
about anything in it. So you have seen it before. So that's generally the 2 roles, quasi-judicial and legislative. Or the due process piece of this, these rules flow from constitutional due process requirements and are designed to protect the integrity of the process and the defensibility of the outcome. Generally, I think this is easy to understand. Applicants are entitled to a fair hearing before a neutral decision maker. So to do that, there are some rules that make sure we're complying with these due process requirements. Apply the applicable legal criteria. Ben, I know left, but if you look at his packets, your staff does an excellent job of generally pointing out what land use provisions apply, what code sections apply to any given land use application, and the criteria you should be applying to any particular request or application before you. They're pre-existing, and they're generally set forth in our municipal code. Sometimes I will say, if you're on historic preservation, we have guidelines that you're also being asked to apply. So when you see an HPC decision, it sometimes doesn't always come from the code, but it becomes from guidelines that were adopted by city council probably many years ago in some instances. But that's what the law is. The second part of ensuring due process is this idea that we should refrain from ex parte communications or outside the hearing communications during the pending quasi-judicial matter. And finally, if you have a conflict of interest, you need to disclose that conflict of interest. And it may be a conflict of interest that requires you to recuse yourself because there is an appearance and/or a direct conflict that would, in the eyes of the law, prevent you from being an impartial decision maker. So again, those activities that we talked about that are okay as a legislature are not generally okay in these quasi-judicial settings. As I said, a quasi-judicial matter requires you to act and think like a judge. These are all the things that generally you shouldn't do in the quasi-judicial arena. Don't make up your mind before the hearing. Don't prejudge or make any pre-hearing statements. Don't go out and speak with one side or the other before the hearing. Here again, if you have questions, direct them at staff, send them to staff. Staff can then address it at the hearing so that the applicant can hear. Staff is also communicating with the applicant and can share that question so that the applicant can also be prepared.
Yeah, hold on a second, we have a question.
In this line of thinking, I just think this would be a question I actually don't fully know the answer to. When is it appropriate to say no to a first reading?
So I will say, I think my answer on that is it's generally riskier to say no at a first reading because we haven't had a public hearing on it. So the question would be, why do you feel it shouldn't be passed at first reading if you don't know anything about sort of the ask and or the criteria that should be used? There is a situation where I think you could say no, and that's when somebody is asking for something that just could never be approved. And I'm trying to think of an example, and one's not coming to my mind right away. But generally speaking, I think it is riskier to not pass at first reading simply because you don't have the record to support why you would be declining it, unless it's sort of very clear Let's just say somebody brought to you an ordinance that says they want to tear down City Hall. I think you could say no to that at first reading, or to disband City Council. Like, I mean, if it's just so outrageous and so egregious that there is no world in which you would ever even consider it, I think that might be a situation where you could deny it first reading. That's not to say you couldn't deny it first reading and we couldn't support it, either through this information in the staff memo, which sometimes would be able to support it. I just think you're always in that scenario precluding the applicant from having an opportunity to respond to all the reasons you have, you kind of are looking at the criteria and the facts as you know them to be. Not giving them an opportunity to respond is always somewhat frowned upon in a judicial world. The idea is you get to hear from everybody. They all get to make their arguments and try to persuade you. You're basically denying them that ability.
No, sorry, one second. I just want to say I appreciate that, and because of recent endeavors, I feel like it's something that needs to be reminded at certain first readings, especially that sometimes it is signaling support, but sometimes it's just getting to the actual publication, because I think there's confusion in the public at times.
Yeah, I agree. And I was just going to go a little further, so thank you for asking the question. On the difference between legislative and quasi-judicial, is legislative less of a concern if you're voting on first reading versus a quasi-judicial?
I would say no. I would say there's more risk involved in the quasi-judicial process because this idea that everybody
Right.
deserves a fair hearing. So in the legislative world, there's
It could
really.
be something that's brought by staff to us and you just really don't like it, and you just say no at first reading, and that's where you stand on it, but it's not the same requirements when you're reviewing legislative to have, quote, the open mind, be impartial, and you could let people know if you have a bias against it.
And in legislative world, you can prejudge it. You can say, this is not something, I ran against it. It's not something I would ever support. I mean, you could make all those comments.
As a legislative, but separate from quasi-judicial. I really appreciate that clarification between the two.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did that help at all?
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
I
it
can
did,
kind
and
of
some of
maybe
this
think about it
is-
further.
Well, and if you had voted no at first reading of a quasi-judicial manner, and it went forward to second reading, would they potentially say, I'd like to strike you from the panel because you've already made your mind up, you voted no at first reading?
I think that's a possibility.
That's a possibility, or your no vote later could still be charged the same way that now it's a 3-2, and the one who spoke out the first reading has been joined by someone else. Could they say this was maybe biasing the rest of council, or, still pull you into court even though they got an approval with 3 out of 2?
Yeah, I think anytime you say no, you vote to not pass a quasi-judicial ordinance at first reading, it does cast a shadow of, have you made up your mind already before really hearing all the evidence? And it does open that door to that challenge from either side of this. Oftentimes you have neighbors that might have a position on an issue that's different from the applicant or different from staff, and so you're always sort of opening that door.
Yeah.
And this is just a small follow-up, but it seems that if you had a sticking point with something you've read on first reading, this is your opportunity to ask staff to really explore it for you for second reading. I've heard concerns about this, or that this might not pan out. Can you please research that and bring us to second reading? So it's not voting no or telling you to suppress your concerns until second reading. That's your opportunity to make sure it's actually presented by staff and investigated by staff.
I agree. So these are all the things that you don't do. These are on your handout,
Right.
pretty much. I think they're sort of self-explanatory. It says, don't speak with one side or the other before a hearing. I would expand that to don't speak to really anybody before a hearing. And we'll talk about sort of some suggestions or some guidance of what to do when you do have people approach you that do want to talk to you, because I think you've all faced that. Don't participate, again, if you have any interest, or if you know a family member has an interest, call the city attorney's office would be my advice to you, so we can talk through if it actually qualifies as a conflict of interest under our code. Don't sign any pro or con petitions. again, really base your decisions on the record you have before you. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But really the idea here is just like a judge, you let the parties bring the information to you. You ask questions, but generally speaking, the idea is you don't bring your own information into the hearing. And we'll talk about this a little bit more because you don't live in a vacuum and you walk by some of these properties every day, and that's okay. But the idea is you might then form a question based on what you know to be true about the specific cited issue. Don't be a witness, prosecutor, advocate, or investigator. Again, these are all people judges hear from, but they are not the actual witness or advocating for any side or investigating the issue.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What if you know a potential hearing is coming, but it's indefinitely out? Like, can you have those conversations before?
I always look at when the application was filed. I would say when you know the application's been filed, or you know an application is going to be filed, because sometimes there's some public outreach beforehand, the most conservative and best practice is probably to refrain from engaging in discussions and/or participating as a community member in those scenarios.
And if you had, and then
Yeah,
it comes forward, you would disclose as an ex parte, but not truly ex parte, but just informing your board, I went to this open house they had about their new development 3 months ago. There was no application pending, but I did meet the principals. Or, would that be?
That's okay. So just because you engage in an ex parte communication doesn't necessarily disqualify you, and we'll talk about that. It's more of a judgment call. A lot of times they can be cured by just making a record about the information you received so that the applicant knows that you have this information and can respond to that information if they want to, and so that staff know, so that they can also respond if they feel it's inaccurate or you've had you're maybe getting some information without getting the entire context or whatnot. But as long as you make a record on it, usually that's enough to cure the potential issue. Bless you. However, if you say something during your ex parte communications like, I would never vote to approve that, then that might be such a bias that you've already prejudged the matter, or at least they could show you've prejudged the matter, and that would lead to a disqualification. Yeah. But usually we can cure them.
Okay.
So here's to your question, Christine, wait till the matter is ripe. Really, if you know something's coming down the pipe, or you've heard, through various people in town that somebody's going to be applying to do something, just make sure you don't decide anything, or you wait to really get into the deliberative process on that topic. Just remain fair and unbiased and impartial. Don't say anything publicly. Try not to think about it as I'm making a decision right now. Hold off on making that decision until you've heard everything and it's during that public hearing process. Social media is kind of something new. I think these rules have always been around, but social media is one where I think people have maybe gotten themselves into some trouble by commenting on a social media page before the hearing, and that could disqualify you. And then, I think let your decision speak for itself. We don't get to jump into your minds to say, why did you make that decision? You're free to tell people, but realistically, you're under no legal obligation to tell people what your intent was or your decision-making on a particular topic. It's defensible if you've made it on the information in the record and you haven't, you're a fair and unbiased decision maker. Even if you held a minority view, it's always nice to remember that, you need to respect your other fellow council members' decisions on those topics. So Pete always does these presentations to staff, and he always includes these great little comics, so I thought I'd try it. Just the sort of, the developer and the commissioner sitting in the pool together talking, and should they disclose it? Yes, you should tell us if you've been talking business with somebody about something. So this is sort of the big critical thing you have to do, which is avoid these ex parte communications. What do they look like? It could be meeting privately with the applicant. The applicant calls you up and says, I really just want to explain it to you. And they're not doing it to get you in trouble. They just want to be able to give you their viewpoint of why they're doing what they're doing. You can't do that. That is an ex parte communication. Just remind them of that. You really, and generally speaking, we tell you that you can talk to your fellow council members so long as you don't violate open meetings law, but this is one area where you can't. You can't say, hey, I think this is a really good project, I want it to get off the ground. You can't go to your fellow council member in a quasi-judicial process and make that plea.
You could make that plea during your comments on a motion that's been made in a public meeting.
Correct.
But not, yeah, exactly.
Not beforehand. You can't be sort of lobbying your fellow council member to get on board with a vote. You know, a lot of times these big ones have public meetings. I would suggest that you not attend those advocacy discussions and/or public meetings where the purpose is to share information, the applicant to share information with the public. Just kind of ask yourself, if you were the applicant, does this feel like you're being a fair and impartial judge with their application if you do some of these activities? Yeah, any questions there? Okay. Text messages are ex parte, so sometimes I think people get confused. They're like, well, you know, they texted me, but I didn't engage, I didn't talk back. Still an ex parte communication. Emails, same thing. Chance encounters in the grocery store. If it happens, it's okay. We can usually cure it, but you have to disclose it. I would suggest you call my office first, and we can talk about the best way to disclose it, but sometimes they happen the day of, and as long as you disclose it during the hearing, it should be okay. I might have to follow up with you and just ask you generally if you can still be fair and impartial, if there's anything that, you know, you feel you cannot be a fair and impartial decision maker based upon that contact. The details are helpful, as many details as you can provide, who, when, how. And here's another thing, like in these quasi-judicial matters, we can't keep people confidential. If they talk to you about it, we have to disclose who, because there again, the applicant gets to know who's making these comments. So keep that in mind. There are other, in the legislative world, and in your other, when you're wearing other hats, the open records law does us, in some very limited circumstances, allow us to not disclose certain communications to you from constituents if they feel it, they should be confidential.
So just back on that last one for a second. They were really stressing this at the CML meeting, but there were some mayors there who said, I ask everyone to put their phones away in the corner so they don't get text messages during legislative meetings, or, excuse me, quasi-judicial. But any text message or email that you receive during a meeting becomes part of the public record because it happened during that 2-hour period, that 1.5-hour period, or whatever, during the meeting, it all becomes public record.
And we always say
And
this.
it's horrible.
Yeah, we always say this in the law, you can't unring the bell. So if you saw it, you saw it, and the applicant should get,
No.
all of the people at the table should get to know.
Or the same message, or send it right to, you know, it's just best to almost have them off and not have to worry about that. Thank you.
And if you get those, I think my next slide addresses this, so be ready. But if you get those, I would suggest using staff as a resource. So you can always forward these communications to staff. They will make sure they get in the packet. They will make sure the applicant has it. They can actually reach out and respond, again, because they're not the decision maker in these cases. They can respond sometimes on behalf or answer questions if members of the public have them. So again, you can't do those things, but you can use your staff as a resource. You might want to, if you know a big matter is coming up and you're getting a lot of attention, you might just want to formulate how you do intend to address these as they come up to you. You know, thanks for your interest, but letting them know you can't discuss this application outside the upcoming hearing, and then directing them to really reach out to staff or attend the public hearing and give public comment on these topics. That's how they can share this information with you in these types of hearings. Here's an example. We're happy to help you write something if you're getting a lot of comments and you want some help about how to handle that with the public. So that's all I really have on ex parte. I think that kind of generally covers what they are and why you shouldn't engage in them. But do you have any specific questions, any scenarios you want to run through?
I do.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kate. Do you have any examples of when this has become an issue in our community?
I can't think of when it's become an issue because at least the times I know it's occurred, I knew when we could make a record. So it's hard to say if.
But there's never been a lawsuit, no one's been challenged on it.
I know the Snowmass Town Council member who used to manage the Top of the Village Condominium Association. He was serving on their board, and it was about Base Village or something in Snowmass. And he thought it was a bad idea, and he took it as his role as a condominium association manager to send a letter out to all the condo owners that this was not a good project. And they immediately, I can't remember whether it was after the decision was made and he voted no, they sued, or whether he was just pushed out of making the decision because he had done that sort of thing. That was a really kind of flagrant, going, wait a second, didn't you even think twice about your role on council before you sent this letter out? I know that at different times in the county, there's been ones where people are like, we're going to call this up,
Yeah, I can honestly say, Bill, I've never seen in my 15 years of government service, I've never seen a case come back on an ex parte communication. That being said, most of the time, if the players know, we're having those discussions ahead of time and trying to mitigate those risks, either by talking to the council member or commissioner who may have prejudged a matter and talking to them about recusing themselves, or letting the applicant know about the information so that they could respond accordingly. I think where I would probably see it the most is if we found out after the fact and there was substantial, like it was enough to show some bias, then I think you might have a due process issue. So that's why we're always sort of conscious of it.
Got it, thanks.
But I've never seen one come back personally.
Wasn't that situation in Glenwood, wasn't that because of ex parte communication during executive session, if you know what I'm talking about?
Recently, there was something in the
City
paper.
manager or something, yeah.
So yeah, it can cause problems.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we do, yeah.
Hey,
And I credit the councils and the
Yeah,
people
yeah,
I've worked
we have plenty of
for
time.
being good about it, yeah.
What if it's during a campaign and you're asked on an issue to make a judgment on something that like might be coming in if you're potentially elected, and you prejudge it because it's campaigning? Can that be used?
That can be used to show bias, for sure. I think the best way to handle that would be, I think that might be coming up as a quasi-judicial, it would be coming up as a land use application, and I shouldn't speak on it if there's because it would probably recuse me from then acting as a council member if I'm elected. I think that's how you can handle that situation.
Yeah, I think to literally say, it's more important to preserve my opportunity to vote on that matter, and we'd like to hear from you in that public setting, but I can't really hear from you now, or it might be something where I might offer my opinion about that project, might mean I won't be able to vote on it in the future. And I usually give people some comfort by saying, well, I know I can't talk to you about this, but please take comfort in knowing I cannot talk to the proponents or opponents either. I'm not hearing from either side. And just make that clear. It's not that I'm just putting you off, I'm putting everyone off. Do we have any other questions or thoughts about it? I think the one thing I kind of heard down there was them giving examples of past hearings that it went bad, and it kind of scared you. But for someone to kind of say, well, I don't really think that side yard setback is 15 feet. I went out there myself and walked it, and it was only 12 feet. And it's like, no, don't do your own investigation. No, you can't present facts to you during first reading. You could ask staff, can you please measure the side yard setbacks for accuracy? But don't go out and start doing your own investigation of these projects.
Yeah,
I did my own research.
Yeah. And then it's sticking to the criteria when making a decision. It's not like, I'm voting against this because I've really never liked the color purple, and you're painting the whole thing purple, and I don't like purple. That's not in the criteria. That's a personal feeling. That vote could be thrown out later. I don't like the building because you're asking for a height variance that doesn't fit in the character of our town, that's a legitimate, based on the criteria, based on the code, based on the actual application. So those sort of differences of why you're saying you're voting no on something, and the importance of creating the record for any appeal that might be, that it was not made on personal feelings, it's not made on, I don't think the community really needs this anymore. Hey, but your code says you're eligible, you've fulfilled the code, your no vote could be disqualified. So making sure you're really creating the record as you're making the final decision on these matters.
And I will say, if staff's supportive and you support it too, an easy way to do that is just to say, I find it meets the criteria as explained in staff's memo. That's a very easy way to sort of do it, and then you're referencing what's in the record already. When you deny something, it does help for my staff to defend your decision if you provide the findings of fact and why you feel they did not meet any specific criteria as the basis for your denial. That's always very helpful. Rachel brought up the idea of site visits, and I always say you don't go into these things, and if you sit in a courtroom or a jury trial, they talk about this. We don't ask you to check your personal history or your knowledge of this town at the door. We don't operate in a vacuum. You might walk by some of these places every day, and that's okay. But if you do have a specific question, like I walk by it every day and I know where that tree is and you're gonna have to tear down that tree, aren't you? There again, you're sort of interjecting facts as you know them to be into the record, whereas really it should be more of a question of, can you tell me where that tree is on the property? Will it need to be removed? I'm using an example of a tree, but that's how you best sort of address those issues.
Yeah, that same question, as you said at the beginning best, we're not witnesses.
Yeah.
We're not prosecutors, we're judges.
Yeah, and so you certainly can ask that question based upon your knowledge. Same with like, I know sometimes people like to look at assessor's records or values or things like that. Generally, it's not a great thing to do, but if you do it, you just have to, if you're going to use that information, you have to give the applicant, you have to let them know you figured that out and let them respond to that. And generally, it's good to just let them be the people that give you the information and don't go out and find it for yourself. But there are ways to get to that question if you have a burning question in your mind. It's best just asked as a question and don't assume you know something if it's not part of the record. That's kind of how to act.
Great.
The other thing that we just, for the due process piece, is to make sure you're fair and impartial. Here's another like funny little comic. I try to make these not so boring, but it's kind of a heavy topic.
Pretty good. Pretty good lawyer joke.
So I will say our code sets forth the conflicts of interest that would disqualify you from voting. They're set forth in the municipal code, and when you call me, this is what I do. I look up at the municipal code and I say, okay, does it fit into one of these conflicts of interest? So generally speaking, you cannot perform a direct official action, and a direct official action is actually defined in our code, but in a quasi-judicial matter, you cannot vote on the issue. If you have a substantial interest in a transaction, or in this case, in the application, if your family member has a substantial interest in the application, if you have a substantial interest as an affiliate of a firm that is the applicant, or you're a representative of the applicant. We have a voluntary disclosure procedure that's set forth in the code that then explains what you have to do if you have these. Generally, you have to call us, and we have to make a formal disclosure on the record. In some cases, it requires you to recuse yourself from voting and to leave the room, because the idea is you can't influence the decision in any way, and being in the room could influence your fellow council members. Substantial interest is defined. Really, I think on this slide, it's the 300-foot proximity. So if you or an immediate family member resides or owns in property within 300 feet of the property in a quasi-judicial process, you are recused. You cannot participate. The idea being that you would be substantially affected by that decision. If you have at least a 1%, if you or your spouse or domestic partner own 1% or more of another party, or an immediate family member owns 5% of a party that's the applicant. If you or an immediate family member is an officer of the entity that is the applicant. And obviously, if you are the applicant or you own any interest in the applicant, you have to disclose that and cannot participate. E is sort of related to contracting, and so is F. But essentially, if you work for one of an entity that's coming before this board in a quasi-judicial matter, you should disclose it. We'll talk about, and I think you would reach out to us to understand if it actually qualifies as a conflict of interest, because if you worked for them 6 months ago and no longer work for them again, that might be fine. If you don't have any if it's a big company like the Aspen Skiing Company and your husband is like a lifty, it may be okay. So we just need to understand those facts a little bit more. Any questions there? And again, when these questions come up, I look at the code every time because I can't remember these off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Because it does take a factual investigation into what exactly is that relationship to understand if it amounts to a conflict of interest. So the code sections are there, and I can certainly, if anybody would find this interesting, I'm happy to send it to you. I would also note that section 2.02.110 of your code spells all of this out, actually very succinctly. It requires, it states what rules you must follow when acting in a quasi-judicial capacity. It talks about remaining impartial, disclosing conflicts of interest, avoiding ex parte communications, take no positions. You cannot prejudge the matter, and you have to manage your personal feelings and biases, and remain impartial. Again, if in doubt, always feel free to call us. We're happy to talk it through and figure out what the best course of action is in these matters. But I think the most important thing is that your applicants feel like they have a fair and impartial process when they come here and go through these proceedings. I did add a little bit of open meetings law because this kind of gets into it a little bit. The idea here is that and your guys are interesting because your quorum is 3 members, whichever is fewer, but it's 3 members. So a meeting must be open to the public when at least 3 of you gather and discuss public business. Meeting is defined broadly, and there's been a lot of litigation on this issue, but meeting can be any kind of gathering. It can include text messages, emails, telephone calls, any other means of communication whereby, and it could be serial, meaning that maybe 2 of you talk, and one of you goes and tells a third what the 2 of you talked about and the positions of the 2, and now you're getting the position of a third. That's considered a serial meeting, and the school board down in Aurora got in some big trouble for doing this because they all met behind closed doors, not together, but one person went and polled everybody individually and made a decision, and then they rubber stamped it at the meeting. So that was called a serial meeting in the Supreme Court's decision on that topic. I see that more like when in text messages maybe, where somebody texts one council member and then another, and they maybe tell a fourth, oh, I talked to this guy, and they all would vote for it. So that's kind of where you see that. Generally speaking, we don't have to notice chance gatherings or social gatherings if the idea is you don't discuss public business. I would just ask it that if all 5 of you happen to be at the same social gathering, which can happen, we're a small town, that you don't talk about public business. And I think you all understand that rule. But in these cases, again, both in the legislative capacity and the quasi-judicial capacity, you have these open meetings law rules. They apply in both. And in the quasi-judicial, you should not be talking to one another before. You should do all of that at the public meeting. And in legislative, it's okay to do it so long as you're not conducting a serial meeting or meeting with more than 3 of you, or 3 of you or more.
Very good.
Any
Any
questions
other
on that?
questions or questions about any of these items? Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
We
you for
really
your
appreciate it, keeping us in line and out of trouble,
Yeah.
Out of the courts.
out of the courts. All right, so the last thing would be to talk about Mountain 2030.
Yeah.
And
Do you want me to go to the front of the room? Feel like
As long as grassroots can get the main shot on you, that's fine.
okay. So I just wanted to start off with circling back with Councilmember Guth's comments from last week and talking about, how do we set up some plans and contingency items in case the airport closure has kind of an adverse impact on the economy. I wanted to let you all know that I did speak with ACRA this last week and tried to connect on a timing for that meeting. They are suggesting probably the second half of September at this point. They're going to have 2 listening sessions. It sounds like the first half of September. So they can hear from the business community again and get kind of general sentiments on how everybody's feeling. But they thought maybe it'd be best to go towards the second half of September. That wouldn't line up with a tax question in terms of tax holiday. And I know I kind of
It could
expressed.
be March, right? Like you said?
Yeah, you could always have another election in March, and if you wanted to do that. And I know I did mention last time, like, hey, tax holiday is a voter requirement. I'd also say that things on something like the lodging community, it is a big lift when you do tax adjustments. When we just adopted the new STR taxes and when we decided to delay when they were required and things like that, that caused them actually a lot of strife, just to be clear, because that requires them, it's like they get their pre-bookings and they often will give us their tax collections at the time of pre-bookings. I'm like, you haven't earned those dollars yet for the stay, and yet they're prepaying, and then they'll get into a situation where somebody will cancel and then they have to do refunds, and then there's a question, well, did you pay tax? Didn't you pay tax? It gets a little confusing. So just something to be aware of, like that particular issue would be probably challenging for the lodging community. I bet there's ways around that if you wanted to try ways to offset the cost of a stay for somebody to come here, that, you could do a voucher program or something potentially different. But that's aside. I just wanted you to know that's in motion, and we'll hopefully have a meeting on the books by the end of September. But in that same vein, there's the opportunity to do the Mountain 2030 sponsorship if folks are interested. We talked about this back in the mini retreat back in May, I believe that was, with council, just kind of a soft, assessment. Since that time, I've been having staff do a lot of research. We've actually, over the last couple of weeks, had a lot more in-depth conversations with that organization. And I'm starting to feel a little bit better about kind of what's expected of the sponsor of the event. Because originally I was worried about the capacity and kind of the venue needs of the operation. We're not set up to be a major kind of conference center type space. So we kind of threw out some of the limitations that we thought our community might have in some of those areas. Mountain 2030 basically said, hey, we are really interested in being here. Our values align very well with our environmental stewardship as an organization. It's very good on value messaging. And it lines up very well for some of the airport closure. This would be the October of 2027. So it would basically bring in, it's a 2-day event plus the cast meeting that's kind of tacked on to the back end of that. Brings in 600 attendees plus, most likely. And basically you're bringing in climate experts, governmental leaders, and others to kind of sit around and collaborate on tackling this climate problem. The financial ask for a sponsor is $150,000. I think that is a nugget this organization can cover if that's what's required and council wishes. We can also look to see if there's other partners that want to kind of help soften some of that. There's also a desire to have us as the sponsor support kind of connections and I don't think we'll lead it, but support finding donors to help raise maybe up to another $100,000. It's not a firm $100,000, but it's a target number that they're looking for. There's also a need to have some support for sourcing rooms for the stays. ACRA is very much interested in supporting that effort, so they're on board with that, and I don't think that's going to be an issue. And then there's a requirement to have some representatives on kind of a steering committee that they need to have staffed up. I think we would serve more on kind of an advisory role and some of that, again, create some of those relationships with some of the other local businesses and venues and things of that nature. So I believe the question is if council's kind of interested in this from a soft straw poll tonight, what I can do is bring back something a little bit more formal, and we can look at agreeing to be the sponsor for 2027's event.
Let me just say, I was concerned with the magnitude of, what we're already doing as a city and can we handle this? But I think there's been a lot more give and take and a little more clarification on the expectations, let's put it that way. So in general, I'd like to support this. I'd like to see it go forward. The things that I want to kind of bear in mind for all of us is that the focus of this upcoming 2027, as often happens with these organizations, is picked in advance. So it's climate change and what we're all doing about that. And given the Spokane, Washington wildfires they're seeing right now, it's like bigger than they've ever seen before. We know what's happening in our own state. Europe and, those things, that's a great topic. That's very important. I just want to point out that MountainTown 2030 is also environmentally aligned with us on issues like Forest Service funding and having enough people to be out there in the Forest Service. They are aligned with us on multiple issues. It's not just that one, even though that's the focus of this year. And so when you get to potentially a new administration or at least a new Congress next year, I think it's really powerful to have allies who can help lobby with you for all of our Forest Service and all of the water needs of the West Slope and the western United States. And see, this is what I see the mountain towns as being valuable connections, valuable partnerships, and advocates who understand our needs and need the same things. So that's one of the reasons I'd like to support this and continue to strengthen those bonds. But that's just my opinion, and let's see, John, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, you've all already heard me talk about this, so I'll keep it short. I think I get a great deal of, pleasure, a great deal of knowledge out of the Colorado Association of Ski Towns. And this is like the Colorado Association of Ski Towns on steroids.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really great event. I think that it's coming here in October of 2027 while our airport is closed could be really beneficial to our community. And having attended 3 of these so far in Vail, Breckenridge, and Jackson Hole, I think we have a lot to offer, and I know the organizers are excited to have it, and I think Aspen has a lot to offer to this organization, and that's why I support this.
That's great. Sam or Christine or Bill, anybody else's comments?
I support this. You just brought up a curiosity of mine, though, as far as how much sales tax we collected last year per how many visitors we have, and just wondering how much on average of. Yeah, well, and just like, I support this on its merits alone, but I'm now just curious, like, the only ask is beyond some like lifting, like sweat labor, sweat equity is like $150,000, right? So I'm just wondering, is that going to be basically paid back in turn through 600 visitors or, and obviously every visitor spends differently, but I was just curious, like on average, like 600 visitors coming to Aspen, how much sales tax on average would that like generate, just based off like rough numbers and not on anything that you can actually be like?
Appreciate the question. I don't have an answer for you
No, I
tonight,
wouldn't expect
but certainly
you to.
something I can look into.
And that's a real tough one. I mean, I appreciate the question, but when you look at the whole sales tax ladder, it's so divided among different entities. You know, if you pick one tax to say, okay, well, how much tax are we going to get from the 1% that goes to this, but between the amount that goes to the county, the state.
No, I'm not saying it needs to come back
No,
to say,
no.
I'm more curious, like, on the whole.
whole.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how much 600 visitors would potentially generate in sales tax revenue?
And again, I'm agreeing with you. I'd love to have the number, whatever Pete can come up with. But, you know, when I've traveled to some of these things, it's like, great, there's 2 business days, I'm going to take 2 vacation days the day afterwards. Other people, I'm going to be there for the meeting, and I'm going to fly out the night of the last night. So they don't stay. So it all depends on the individual's plans. Some are like, well, as long as I'm flying to Aspen, I'm going to stay there for 3 extra days. That's a real plus. It's very hard to calculate.
Yeah, not asking for perfect science, just a curiosity, because it feels like a lot of the things we do get paid back in turn. This is just one example.
It will be a boost for a lot of our little funds, like
Well,
the
especially-
Child Care Fund
I
and
guess,
others. Yeah.
secondary to that, I think, as Bill alluded to last week, that the wedding season's probably gonna be the most hurt by the airport closure, and that's like October, so I imagine this would be a good infill for like that hurt economy as far as events.
Yeah, I think the biggest industries that would see some real returns on this would be the lodging community and the restaurant industry, quite honestly. I don't know how big of spenders these folks are on high-end luxury goods per
No,
se,
but
The thrift shop
Yeah.
will do a great business that weekend.
curiosity, but yes, support this on its merits.
I'm not particularly compelled to support this because I think we're already doing so much of what this organization is promoting. And I'd rather see us put our money into things that we more desperately need in this community, like maintaining our forest health adjacent to the community. I was looking up at as I was riding up to Maroon Bells the other day, the beetle kill is spreading like shockingly quickly. And I will also say this come budget season, I think we need to be contributing significant financial resources to improving our forest health adjacent to Aspen. So I'd rather these dollars be used for something like that.
Thank you. Christine?
I'm supportive of it. I think it's a nod of goodwill to our local businesses during an off year. So even in a good year, I would be supportive of it, but I think this is an extra necessary time to bring this business to town. So I'm looking forward to having all those communities here.
all right, well, I'll keep working on it and bring something back to council then for consideration.
Well, thanks for bringing it to us, both John and Pete, and the investigation you've done thus far, and council for all weighing in. And that's the end of our work session. Everyone have a great Monday evening. Thank you, Grassroots. We appreciate you.